Children are being victimized on so many different levels, in so many different ways. It's actually hard to think about an area where children are not being put last, whether it's protecting their life, their bodies, their innocence, their ability to participate in sports, have safety in bathrooms and locker rooms. We are putting kids last. One area where we've been putting them last, especially for the last 10 years, is in the matter of marriage. 10 years ago, a great injustice was done to our children when the Supreme Court decided by judicial fiat that they would mandate same-sex marriage all across the nation. Now, this had a particularly detrimental effect on children. Leading up to that decision, I, along with several others, filed an amicus brief with the Supreme Court saying, there's a problem with this. Beyond just religious liberty, beyond just talking about this as a sacred institution. When you make husbands and wives optional in marriage, you will make mothers and fathers optional in parenthood. The problem with that is, for children, their mother or father is never optional. Children need their mother and father every day, all their life. But our warning was not heeded. And now 10 years later, we have the receipts. We have seen how, state by state, the laws that govern parenthood have been undone. Here's just a couple examples. We have seen in the name of gender equality, the words mothers and fathers stripped from parenthood statutes. We have seen mothers and fathers removed from birth certificates and 2 women put on those birth certificates instead, legally erasing the child's father on the day that they are born. We have redefined the word infertility, so it's no longer 12 months of unprotected heterosexual sex that doesn't result in a live birth. Now, in some jurisdictions, infertility can be applied to single adults or same-sex couples, so that their creation of a motherless and fatherless child can be subsidized by insurance. We have actually seen new pathways for parenthood created. There's 2 legitimate pathways to take a vulnerable infant home from the hospital. One of them is when you gave birth to that baby. That baby is yours. You have a pre-political right to take that child home from the hospital. The other legitimate pathway is not based on biology, it's based on justice. And that is recognizing that the child has lost their mother or father through tragedy, and that another couple, has done all the screening and background checks and vetting and home studies to ensure that they would be a safe placement for that child. Biology and adoption. Those are the 2 child-centric ways to determine parentage. But unfortunately, in the post-gay marriage world, both of those are deemed discriminatory because same-sex couples can never both be biologically related. And it seemed like kind of oppressive for them to have to go through an adoption process. So they created a new pathway for parenthood, intent-based parenthood, where if they can assemble sperm, egg, and womb and intend to parent the baby and they have a valid contract, they can go home with the newborn from the hospital, even if they're unrelated, even if they're foreign nationals, even if they are sexual predators, even if they have a criminal record. All in the name of adult equality. So that's a problem. It's a problem because there are fundamental needs of children that do not change depending on what 5 Supreme Court justices decide. And you know where we find those fundamental needs? In the Word of God. Let's just take a little look at how Jesus defines marriage. And I bet you can help me with this. In Mark chapter 10, it says, "For this reason, a man shall leave his" what? "And be joined to his, and the 2 will become one. And what God has joined together, let no man." Okay, so what we see there is 3 criteria, 3 characteristics of this one relationship that sets it apart from any other adult relationship. Different from the relationship you have to your children. Different from the relationship you have with your business partner. Different from the relationship you have with your good friend. There's 3 things that make this a marriage according to God. The first one is complementarity. A man shall leave his mother and father, different but equal, that's what complementarity is, and he will be joined to his wife. This is not a marriage of 2 sames. This is a marriage of 2 opposites that perfectly complement one another. Complementarity is critical for the marital union. Now, what I want you to see is that all of these different aspects of marriage, God just didn't pull them out of a hat and decide this is what we're going to call marriage. Every single aspect, these three characteristics of what makes a biblical marriage actually have a very direct benefit to children. So let's talk about complementarity, this idea that it should be a man and a woman within this union. I hate to burst your bubble, but gender is not a social construct. I know you might have heard that the only differences between men and women are these socially conditioned roles, right, that the patriarchy has imposed on us. But that's not the case. Men and women are different. Those differences are important in a variety of different institutions, but they are critical in the institution of the family. So let me just do a little survey here, and we'll just see exactly how different men and women are. I want you to raise your hand, and raise it high, if you've ever seen a baby thrown up in the air. Put your hands up, and look around. Look at how many people have seen a baby thrown up in the air. Keep your hands up. Now I want you to keep your hand up if the person throwing the baby was a woman. Okay, we have 6 female baby throwers in this room. So the truth is, women don't throw babies. Women wear babies. Okay, and all you need to do is go to a park or a church, and you are going to see babies tossed in the air, and it will not be the mom. She will be walking around, bouncing, soothing, cuddling, wearing, wrapping the baby with these 20-yard swaths of fabric all day long. Okay, and that actually is probably the best way to distill the distinctions between men and women. Mothers promote attachment. They give the child security. They create a chemical and emotional bond in utero and for the first, especially 3 years of the child's life by being hyper-responsive to the infant needs and therefore setting the baseline for future healthy trust and attachment. Dads promote separation. And you can see that, not just in the fact that they are tossing the kid and twirling the kid, right, and swinging the kid, but you see them at the playground when the kid falls down and the dad says, "Get up and try again. You're okay." Where the mom goes, "Oh, baby, are you okay? Mommy's going to kiss it. It's okay. You're going to be fine." Okay? Men and women are different. And those differences are critical for child development. If you do not have a male parent, it is very hard for that child to develop fully, emotionally, physically, and psychologically. If you do not have a female parent, it is very hard for that child to properly form attachments in the future. Men and women are not optional in the project of parenting. Children need both of them. So a man will leave his father and mother, be joined to his wife, complementarity. And the two will become one flesh. One flesh. That's monogamy. Monogamy, married to one flesh. Monogamy is critical for children for 2 reasons. Let me explain. First of all, if it's only the child's own mother or father in the relationship, if they exclude all others, if they forsake all others, that means there will never be an unrelated adult in the home. Now, that's really important because statistically, a child's own mother and father are the most connected to, invested in, and protective of them. That's why we have a right to our own children. We have a more vested interest in their future than any doctor or school counselor or teacher or governor or any of these politicians that have never even met them and do not know their name. They belong to us. They belong to us partially because nobody loves them the way that we do. But this project of the family, where we are now remaking it in the image of a same-sex family, which requires unrelated adults to share living spaces with kids, is a detriment to kids. And that goes against a lot of the mantras that we have about family these days. Things like, kids don't need a mom and dad, they just need to be safe and loved. Have you heard that? And maybe you've heard, biology doesn't matter, love makes a family. Have you heard that? Maybe you've heard, kids just need 2 parents. Maybe you've heard, if the adults are happy, the kids will be happy. Any of that sound familiar? Let's do a little test. I want you to get your phones out, and I want you to open up one of your browsers, And I want you to Google the words mother's boyfriend. Google mother's boyfriend. And if all those things are true, if kids just need a two-parent home, if the adults are happy, the kids will be happy. If biology doesn't matter, then kids that are living with their mother and her cohabiting boyfriend would be thriving. The adults are happy, they have two parents, they even have a father figure. So how are they doing? Okay, what did you read? Decapitation, what else? Difficult relationship, what else? Murder, abuse, what else? Toddler what? Toddler abuse? Anxiety? Life or death? So what you're going to see is unending returns of the most horrific cases of child abuse, neglect, and filicide. That is child death. Because statistically, the most dangerous place a child can find themselves in America today is in the home of an unrelated man left to care for the child himself. Now, there are heroic step-parents, incredible men and women who step into the gap and fill the role of a negligent biological parent, and those step-parents need our recognition and encouragement, right? And I agree. I know some of those stepmothers and fathers. But you cannot swap out a child's own mom and dad on a population level and expect the kids to be okay. Anytime an unrelated adult is sharing living spaces, whether it's a man or a woman, a throuple, a live-in boyfriend, a live-in girlfriend, those kids statistically do not fare as well. That monogamy is one of the ways that we can ensure that children genuinely are safe and loved. There's another reason why that monogamy matters. If the child is raised by the two adults responsible for their existence, they also have access to something that children crave, and that is their biological identity. It is very hard for a child to answer the question, who am I? If they cannot answer the question, whose am I? If you want to know one of the reasons why we are seeing so many children plummeting into identity crises and latching their identity onto any kind of scrap that they can find, whether it's a gender confusion or a disability status or a sexual identity, it's because we have cut off this next generation from so many of the stable, transcendent pathways through which humans have discovered their identity all throughout history. They're having to form their identities on their own. Now, this is really important. And I'll do another little thought experiment here. I want you to think of a movie that you've seen where the child goes on a search for their long-lost mother's boyfriend. Anything? Raise your hand if you've seen that movie. No? Weird. Well, let's try this. Raise your hand if you can think of a movie where the child goes on a search for their long-lost father. What is it? What? Give me a movie. Lion. What? Lion. Lion? Great. Obviously things I've never heard of. What else? You're going to have to speak up. Boys in the Boat. Good. What else? What a Girl Wants. Mamma Mia, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Elf, Wrinkle in Time, Pericles, American Tail, Land Before Time. The truth is, we tell these stories all the time. Everybody knows them, everybody gets them, everybody cries along with it when the father is actually found. Because all of us understand that that person, that man and woman, tell us something about ourselves that we can't discover on our own. It's one of the reasons why adoption best practice has shifted so drastically over the last 10 years. Over the last 50 years. In the 60s and 70s, almost all adoption was closed adoption. The child had no identifying information or contact with their first family. Today in the United States, 95% of adoptions are open adoptions. Because social workers recognize that children benefit from as many connections as possible with their first family, even if they can't be raised by them. So that monogamy is very important for a child's protection, safety, and identity. And then finally, what God has joined together, let no man separate. That third characteristic of marriage is permanence. Because children do not need just their biological identity or the development or the safety for 2 months or 2 years or 12 years. They need it all their life. And when there's an unnecessary separation, and I know that there's reasons for divorce, we've generally recognized them in civic law and even religious law as being cases of abuse, adultery, addiction, or abandonment. Sometimes a divorce might be necessary. But the vast majority of divorces today, thank you, no-fault divorce, are not because of those faults. It's because the adults chose not to do the hard work. And there was just a massive study that came out a couple months ago, 5 million samples out of a CDC survey that showed the causation, not correlation, causation between divorce and a 63% increase in teen pregnancies, a 43% increase in incarceration, and a 35 to 55% increased likelihood that if a child's parents divorced, they would suffer an early death. All of these things, complementarity, monogamy, and permanence, matters to children. It's as if God designed an institution perfect for child protection and development. Now, children will need these things whether we recognize that they need them or not. They will always need them, even if our civil laws don't recognize marriage as having these three characteristics. So we've got two options. Either we can allow this fake definition of marriage that removes complementarity, built on the no-fault divorce that removed permanence, moving towards a polyamorous understanding of marriage that will remove the expectation of monogamy, or we can retake this institution on behalf of children. Yes, that is what we're doing. So my nonprofit, Them Before Us, has decided that 10 years is long enough. Child victimization in the legal space where we have rendered them as functional accessories to be assigned to whatever adult has the money and means to acquire them needs to end. So, we are spearheading a national coalition of major pro-family Christian and conservative organizations to do exactly that. We have 3 different areas of focus. The first one is we are working with the lawyers that have both a constitutional background and understand family law and who have spine, and there's like 7 that have all of those. But we're going to create a genuine judicial strategy that can win. The second thing we're going to do is we're going to change public opinion. We're not going to have this be a conversation that is focused on adults and their sadness or identity or feelings or longings or losses or backstory. We are going to convince the American public that marriage is a matter of justice for children, and we have to restore natural marriage to what it was before, because we will not tolerate children being victimized any longer. And then we're going to turn the church into a child-centric fighting force. We have Protestant leaders and Catholic thinkers who are going to help us develop a curriculum that communicates, yes, the basics of marriage, what I've just told you, why complementarity, permanence, and monogamy is so critical to child protection, development, and identity. But then we're also going to tell the Christians, do you know what? This is your job. This is your job. Everywhere the church has gone, in every century that it has existed, it has consistently confronted threats to children. The threats have changed. Missionaries in China in the early 1900s confronted the horror of foot binding and helped to put an end to it. Missionaries across Africa have treated the victims of female genital mutilation. Christians everywhere, in every country, have refused to go along with practices of abortion and infanticide. The cultural threats to children changed, but the Christian understanding of child protection did not. So what we need to do today, church, is understand that we're not dealing with foot binding or infanticide in the conventional sense. We're not dealing with female genital mutilation in the name of Islam. We are dealing with it in the name of transgender ideology. But the greatest threat to children today has to do with separating them from their mother or father through these legal regimes and technological processes that make them commodities to be acquired to any and every adult. And we need to stand against it. So, be on the lookout, because we are going to need you. This is not a job that many politicians are going to take up, but it is the job of every Christian. This is the great cloud of witnesses that we need to step into. We need to take on the mantle of child protection, because we Christians, we are the people who defend the fatherless. We don't manufacture them. Thank you.